Welcome to the new video of Neurophilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin. The theater of everyday life. At some point in life, we've all felt it. That quiet, disorienting drift between who we are and who we appear to be. You sit in a conversation, nodding at the right moments, smiling just enough, and yet somewhere deep inside, a voice whispers, "I'm not really here." You say, "It's all good," when it clearly isn't. You agree to plans you hope will be cancelled. You laugh on cue, speak in borrowed tones, and call it social grace. Society rewards that behavior. We call it courtesy, education, knowing how to behave. But beneath that polite choreography lies a question few dare to face. How much of what we present is real, and how much is performance? Sociologist Erving Goffman believed that human life itself unfolds on a vast stage. He called it impression management, the ongoing attempt to shape how others perceive us. In his view, every interaction is a scene, and each of us, knowingly or not, plays a role. We switch sets, change costumes, adjust lighting, all to sustain the illusion that fits the moment. Think about your day. At work, you project competence and confidence even when you're exhausted. At home, you slip into the roles of child, parent, partner, peacekeeper. On social media, you craft a version of yourself that is brighter, smoother, easier to digest. In each setting, you fine-tune your voice, your body language, your vocabulary. You edit emotions, choosing what to display and what to hide. It seems harmless, even necessary. After all, adaptation is survival, isn't it? We are taught to be agreeable, to blend in, to make others comfortable. Yet every carefully curated role comes at a price. The more masks you wear, the harder it becomes to remember your original face. Goffman warned that the constant performance fractures the self. You don't just act differently in various settings, you begin to become those differences. Each stage breeds its own version of you. The professional, the friend, the lover, the dutiful child, the online persona. These selves rarely meet, and when they do, they clash like strangers forced into the same room. Over time, this division creates what he called role distance, a subtle dissociation between the person and the part they play. You go through motions, say the right words, fulfill expectations, but feel detached from your own actions. It's like watching yourself from the balcony while life performs itself below. You operate, but you don't inhabit. This fragmentation is not always visible from the outside. You still smile, still post pictures, still deliver results. But inside, something is missing. A sense of unity, of being one continuous person. The more you perform, the less you belong to yourself, and society applauds it. It calls you adaptable, professional, charismatic. It never asks whether you are whole. The world doesn't reward authenticity. It rewards consistency. If your mask never slips, people call you stable. But what if stability is just another name for emotional paralysis? Think about the effort required to maintain these layers. The careful monitoring of tone, posture, phrasing, the silent calculation of what will please and what will offend. Beneath that effort, fatigue builds. Not the fatigue of the body, but of the spirit. The exhaustion of never being able to rest in your own skin. Somewhere between the performances, you might feel an emptiness that no applause can fill. A hollowness that whispers, "I've been living everyone else's script but my own." This is the cost of endless adaptation, a slow, invisible self-abandonment. Goffman's theater isn't inherently evil. It simply mirrors reality. But if you forget that you're acting, the stage becomes a prison. You start mistaking costume for identity, approval for connection, applause for love. And when the lights go down, when no one is watching, you're left staring into the dark, uncertain of who remains. That is where the story of self-betrayal begins. in the quiet moments when you feel present yet absent, known yet unseen. The tragedy is not that we perform, but that we forget we are performing. We lose the boundary between survival and surrender. So, if you've ever felt that strange fatigue, that sense of smiling through a fog, you are not broken. You are simply tired of acting. You are sensing, perhaps for the first time, that the roles you've mastered are no longer yours to keep. This is not the end of the play. It is the moment before the curtain rises again, when you finally decide to step off the stage and remember the person who was there before the performance began. Because that, Goffman would say, is where the real story starts. Not in the applause, but in the silence that follows it. The anatomy of self-betrayal. If someone told you that you betray yourself every single day, your first instinct would be to deny it. After all, betrayal sounds cruel, deliberate, a grand act of treachery. But self-betrayal isn't loud. It seeps quietly through the cracks of ordinary life. It wears the mask of kindness, of peacekeeping, of being the good one. It starts with the small, familiar yes that your whole body meant as no. You agree to help when you are exhausted. You show up to events that drain you. You lend time, energy, even parts of your soul, just to keep harmony alive. Society calls it generosity, but Goffman would call it the first act of forgetting yourself. Then come the promises you whisper only to your reflection. Next week I'll rest. Next time I'll speak up. Next time I'll say no. Yet Monday arrives and nothing changes. Why? Because your sense of worth has been built on approval. You fear that honesty might cost love, that truth might invite rejection. So you sacrifice pieces of your integrity to maintain belonging. It's not that you want to deceive anyone. You simply learn that compliance is safer than confrontation. From childhood, you were rewarded for being pleasant, for keeping the peace, for staying agreeable. And somewhere between those early lessons and your adult self, the idea took root that pleasing others is proof of goodness. But it isn't goodness. It's quiet self-abandonment. The third form of betrayal is the most devastating: emotional concealment. How many times have you said, "I'm fine," when everything inside you was collapsing? How many smiles have you performed while your chest was tight with unshed tears? Goffman wrote that society cannot bear raw truth. The stage demands composure. So you learn to amputate emotion, to lock away the inconvenient parts of your humanity. You become fluent in emotional disguise, praised for your strength while dying in silence. At first, this seems like adaptation, but slowly the distance grows between what you feel and what you show. That gap, that hollow pause between the real and the performed, is where self-betrayal takes root. It becomes muscle memory. You no longer even notice the moment you lie to yourself. The tragedy of this constant disguise is cumulative. Each compromise is tiny. A postponed rest, a swallowed truth, a half smile. But together they build a life that no longer feels like yours. You begin to sense an invisible fatigue that sleep cannot cure. You feel anger toward people who demand your time, yet beneath that anger lives shame. Shame for never setting boundaries, for never protecting yourself. It is the fatigue of existing without being, the exhaustion of having 1,000 faces and no home behind them. Goffman's concept of the divided self captures this perfectly. Each context demands a different you, and these versions seldom communicate. You start to feel like a guest inside your own body, a stranger rehearsing lines for roles you never auditioned for. There is no cohesion, no inner dialogue, only adaptation, repetition, performance. And the most haunting part? It works. People like you for it. They call you dependable, understanding, easy to love. They never see that what they love is the version of you built for their comfort. Over time, that real self, the one that laughs too loud, that cries without shame, that hungers for solitude or honesty, starts to fade. You look at your reflection and feel a strange unfamiliarity, as if someone else has been living in your skin. You are performing so perfectly that even you believe the act. This is the anatomy of self-betrayal. Tiny, polite deaths that accumulate over years until you no longer know what life feels like without them. It's not just psychology, it's a spiritual erosion. Each false smile, each postponed boundary, each silenced truth carves away at your authenticity until you mistake emptiness for peace. But peace built on pretending is not peace, it's paralysis. So if you've ever wondered why you feel tired even when life seems fine, look closer. That tiredness isn't weakness. It's the soul's quiet protest against a life performed rather than lived. And this silent fatigue is where the next chapter begins. The moment when performance hardens into routine and the human spirit slips into autopilot. Living on autopilot. There comes a moment when pretending stops feeling like adaptation and starts feeling like absence. You wake up, get dressed, answer messages, attend meetings. Everything looks right from the outside, yet inside, it's as if someone else is moving your body. The lights are on, but the actor has left the stage. Sociologist Erving Goffman called this condition role distance, the subtle fracture between who you are and what you do. At first it feels harmless, just a little emotional detachment to get through the day. But slowly that gap widens until you're no longer living your life, you're simply performing it. You follow a script you never wrote. You reply with pre-approved phrases, smile when required, nod on cue. The world applauds your composure. You are reliable, efficient, productive, the model citizen. Yet beneath that applause lies a profound silence, because somewhere along the way, the real you stopped participating. This is what it means to live on autopilot. You wake at the same hour, drive the same route, talk about the same safe topics. You scroll, reply, deliver, and repeat. Life moves forward mechanically, but the inner voice that once questioned, dreamed, protested, it's muted. You don't decide, you react. You don't feel, you function. It's a strange form of paralysis that society not only normalizes but rewards. The disconnected self is easier to manage, dependable, obedient, never unpredictable. You can sense this in modern culture's obsession with productivity. How fast you respond, how much you achieve, how unbothered you appear. It's an unspoken pact. Keep performing and we'll keep calling you successful. But behind that praise, exhaustion grows. A quiet, existential fatigue, the kind that no vacation can cure. Because it isn't in your body, it's in your spirit. You feel it when you lie awake at night, scrolling through other lives, wondering why yours feels so hollow. You feel it when people compliment you and you don't believe them, because they're admiring a facade. Goffman understood that this distance acts as a defense mechanism. When the role we play clashes with our true self, we disconnect to survive the tension. It's like emotional armor, thick enough to protect us, heavy enough to suffocate us. The longer we wear it, the harder it becomes to breathe authenticity. So you continue. You convince yourself this is just adulthood, that everyone feels this way. You call it being realistic, staying focused, doing what's necessary. But the truth is, you've learned to confuse numbness with maturity. And the cost? Intimacy fades. Joy becomes effort. Moments that once felt alive, laughter with friends, music that used to move you, the simple act of being still, now feel distant, muted, flat. You begin to fear silence, because in silence, the emptiness echoes. Millions live like this, silently detached, impeccably functional. They are doctors, teachers, engineers, parents, creators, outwardly thriving, inwardly adrift. Society calls them successful, their hearts call them missing. Autopilot is not simply routine, it is a slow disappearance of self. You can't pinpoint when it began. Maybe when you chose the safe career instead of the passionate one. Maybe when you stopped expressing anger because it made people uncomfortable. Maybe when you decided it was easier to conform than to explain who you really are. Whatever the moment, the result is the same. You no longer inhabit your own life. This state feels deceptively calm. No highs, no lows, just smooth repetition. But beneath that calm lies an unspoken grief. Grief for the dreams abandoned, the truths swallowed, the spontaneous laughter lost to efficiency. Yet, even here, in this numbness, a whisper remains. Sometimes it comes as restlessness, sometimes as quiet sadness that visits without reason. It is your soul, knocking from the inside, reminding you that there was once a person before the performance, someone curious, imperfect, and profoundly alive. To listen to that voice is risky. It threatens the fragile structure you've built. But ignoring it is costlier still, because every day you continue on autopilot, You move farther from yourself, and one day you'll wake up a stranger wearing your name. The next chapter begins where this numbness is finally challenged. The moment you dare to stop the performance. Goffman called it the collapse of the stages. Not an accident, but a conscious rebellion. A decision to reclaim your own script and speak, for once, without rehearsing. The strategic collapse. There comes a point where pretending stops being a form of protection and becomes an act of self-destruction. You smile when you want to scream. You attend meetings that make your chest tighten. You say, "Of course," while every cell in your body begs to say, "No." And one day, without warning, something inside you simply breaks. But what if that collapse didn't have to be an accident? What if it could be a conscious act, a chosen moment of rebellion, rather than a nervous breakdown? This is what Erving Goffman's theory allows us to see, that the collapse of our social stages doesn't have to be chaos, it can be strategy. He called it the collapse of the performance, and in the language of the self, it's the moment you stop being the character others designed and start being the author of your own truth. The strategic collapse is not gentle. It's not a soft awakening or a peaceful meditation. It is raw, unfiltered honesty. The kind that rearranges everything around you. It's when you refuse to keep acting in a play that no longer feeds your soul. You step out of costume, out of script, out of applause. The first act of collapse is usually small, saying no without apology, not explaining, not over-justifying, just saying no. It sounds easy, but the first time you do it, it feels violent, like betraying a lifelong contract, because you were taught that being agreeable equals being loved. But love that demands performance is not love, it's transaction. The second act of collapse is emotional honesty, allowing yourself to cry where you once swallowed tears, to admit, even to yourself, "I'm tired, I'm hurt, I don't want this anymore." You will feel vulnerable, exposed. Some people will flinch at your truth because they were comfortable with your silence. But discomfort is the price of freedom. The third act is disobedience to expectations. You stop being the always available friend, the perfect colleague, the constant caretaker. And yes, people will say you've changed. They'll accuse you of arrogance, selfishness, or coldness. But what they really mean is you stopped performing the version of you that benefited us. This is the rupture Goffman warned about. When you dismantle the stage, audiences disperse. Some will leave, some will resent you. But what remains is real. Because the ones who stay after the mask falls, those are the ones who see you, not your performance. And here lies the paradox. Collapse feels like loss, but it's actually rebirth. It's the point where the actor dies and the person begins, where your silence becomes listening and your loneliness transforms into reconnection. For the first time, you can hear your own voice without the echo of expectation. Yes, it's painful. You will grieve your roles. You'll miss the security of being admired for the mask you wore. But that admiration was never love. It was applause. And applause fades the moment the act ends. The strategic collapse asks one simple, terrifying question. Who are you without your performance? Most people spend their entire lives avoiding that question, because the answer requires a kind of courage society doesn't teach. It's the courage to lose an identity built on acceptance and to stand bare in your own truth. It's the courage to look in the mirror and finally see the person you once hid to survive. The irony is that freedom begins exactly where control ends. When you stop managing impressions, you stop negotiating your existence. You no longer ask for permission to be real, you just are. This collapse isn't destruction, it's transformation. It's the shedding of an outdated skin that can no longer hold your growing soul. And like any transformation, it comes with chaos, grief, and silence. But beneath that silence, something extraordinary begins to breathe: authenticity. You'll start noticing it in small ways. Your laughter becomes unrestrained. Your voice gains a new tone, one that doesn't tremble with fear. Your body relaxes in spaces that once demanded posture. And slowly a sense of peace returns. Not the peace of compliance, but the peace of truth. This is what Goffman's theory ultimately reveals. That collapsing your performance is not the end of your story, but the start of it. The curtain doesn't fall. It rises again, revealing a smaller audience, yes, but a truer one. And among them, perhaps for the first time, stands the most important spectator of all: you. Rebirth of the authentic self. When the stages finally crumble and the masks slide away, what remains is something both terrifying and beautiful. You. Not the carefully arranged version, not the smiling professional or the polite survivor, just you, raw and unedited. At first, the silence feels unbearable. There are no more scripts to follow, no applause to measure your worth. The audience is gone. The world seems dimmer, smaller, quieter. But in that quiet, something sacred begins to move. The faint heartbeat of your real self, the one that has waited patiently beneath every performance. Rebirth never arrives like a sunrise, it arrives like dawn after a long blackout, faint, uncertain, fragile. You must relearn almost everything. How to rest without guilt, how to say no without fear, how to want something without apologizing for wanting it. Authenticity is not a destination, it is a daily practice of remembering. At first you will tremble. Your voice will sound strange when it finally tells the truth. Your body, once trained to endure, will flinch at peace. You'll second-guess every boundary, every silence, every choice that puts you first. That's normal. You are detoxing from a lifetime of performance. Then, slowly, something shifts. The exhaustion that once defined you begins to fade. Moments that used to feel empty start to breathe again. The smell of morning coffee, the sound of rain, the comfort of solitude, they begin to matter. You start recognizing yourself in small gestures, in the laugh that isn't rehearsed, in the honesty that no longer trembles. This is the miracle Goffman's theory quietly points toward. Once the performance ends, presence begins. When you stop managing impressions, life stops being a stage and becomes a landscape. You walk through it, not for show but for experience. You speak, not to persuade, but to connect. You love, not to be validated, but to share. Of course, not everyone will celebrate this rebirth. Some will say you've changed, others will drift away. They miss the character you played, the agreeable version who fit neatly into their world. Let them go. Their absence is proof that your authenticity is working, because the people who stay now stay for you, not for the comfort you provided. And you'll notice something extraordinary. Life begins to reorganize itself around your truth. Opportunities that once felt forced now flow naturally. Relationships deepen. Conversations gain texture. The constant tension in your body starts to dissolve. Even loneliness feels different. It's no longer emptiness, it's space. Space for creation, for stillness, for self. But authenticity demands responsibility. Once you know your truth, you can't unknow it. You can no longer hide behind politeness or pretend to enjoy what wounds you. Freedom asks for maintenance. It asks you to keep choosing honesty even when it costs you approval. And it will cost you. But the reward is wholeness. Rebuilding from truth is not easy, but it's real. You begin to trust yourself again, your instincts, your emotions, your limits. You no longer ask, is this acceptable? You ask, is this authentic? And that single shift changes everything. With time, self-respect replaces self-sacrifice. Joy returns, not the manic joy of being liked, but the quiet joy of belonging to yourself. You no longer perform love, you participate in it. You no longer chase purpose, you embody it. And perhaps one evening, standing in front of a mirror, you'll finally see what was missing all along. Not perfection, not success, but presence. The kind that looks back at you with calm eyes and says, "Welcome home." Because in the end, authenticity isn't about becoming someone new, it's about returning to who you were before the world taught you to act. It's the gentle, defiant act of saying, "No more abandoning myself." And from that moment onward, every breath, every word, every silence becomes a form of prayer. A thank you whispered to the life that is finally, unmistakably, yours.